7:30, should we kick off?
Yeah.
So good evening, everyone. So welcome. So let's start off with apologies. Have we received any apologies for this evening?
Yes, we have, Chair. So Councillor Chong is away at the minute and has given apologies, and Councillor Liver has given apologies because she has a conflicting meeting with St Albans District Council, which includes the important presentation on the District Council's housing maintenance contractor.
Okay. Thank you very much. So moving on to item 2. Anyone would like to declare any interests? So, gentlemen. Very much. Chair's report and urgent items. I don't have any. Thank you very much. Have we received any public questions?
No, Chair. Number 3.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, let's go through the minutes for the previous there's a couple of meetings here. First of all is the minutes for the for this meeting from the 18th of September. So I just have one question which relates to the resolution tracker for later. There's an action just to agree some specific sort of targets or KPIs in the agreement with the Harpenden Collective. I would actually be quite curious to see what those targets are.
Yeah, sure. I can get that distributed.
It's not a condition of approval. I'm just sort of curious just to see what they.
Yeah, well, I can get that.
Are you able to share those with the committee?
Yeah, of course.
Any comments or questions on the minutes, please?
No.
Okay, so all those in favour of accepting these minutes, please raise your hand. Thank you very much, everybody. Next up is the minutes of the Town Council meeting for the Supporting Vulnerable People Working Party held on the 2nd of October. A few minutes to read through.
Does anybody know what an Omni projector is? Item 22.1. Page 5.
I don't know how best to describe it. I know it's a very fancy projector that a community grant was given for, but I think Clark might have an idea.
Yes, so it's like a multimedia device, in particular for vulnerable people or older people or those with dementia, that kind of brings to life various things. So you can put historic photos on it, you can play games and show films and things like that. And we gave a grant through the trust to have one, so we use it primarily at the Memory Lane Cafe, but we also loan it out to other community groups as well. Perhaps what we'll do is we'll send some images around of it of what it does, so it kind of brings to life what it is.
Yeah, thank you. You know, don't go to any trouble, but it was just interesting to know what that was.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding these minutes, please?
No.
All those in favour of accepting, please raise your hand. Thank you. Check. Of course, yes, thank you.
When we get to page 19, it says.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, next off is the minutes for the Accounts and Risks Subcommittee held on 9th of October. Pages 7, 8 and 9. So, any comments or questions?
No.
No. Those in favour of accepting these minutes, please. Thank you very much, everyone. All right, that concludes the review of the previous minutes. Thank you, everyone. And could you move us on to the next item, please, the forward resolution? Forward of the resolution track, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I can report that all of the items on the resolution tracker from our last meeting have been successfully completed. It's not certain enough to add it to the forward plan. We've not received the application yet. But however, we have had correspondence from someone who's interested in restarting Nicky Radio. So we will more than likely receive another grant application in our January meeting.
You remind us what Nicky Radio is, please?
Just the local online radio station.
Okay.
So I think, the brief bit of research I've done, I looked on their website and it looked like they were running in, the last post was sort of 2016, but so I'm guessing it stopped around then. But that's about until we get the proper application, I'm not sure of the detail of what they're proposing.
I ask then, so you mentioned a grant, would that be a business grant and not a charitable grant? Which grant pot would they be?
So
asking?
community grant, I believe.
A community one.
Yeah, so the same as we've got later in the agenda.
Yeah, Roger. Okay, but it's good. That's good to heads up on.
Of interest, is it the people who were previously doing it or something?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Never heard of it.
Yeah, I do recall it for the day. I can't claim to have been a listener, but okay. Any other comments or questions on the plan and the resolution tracker, please? Okay, so we've been asked to note and approve the planner in Appendix A. So all of those in favour of approving, please raise your hand. Do we need to vote to note? 212. All those in favour of noting, just to. Thank you very much, everyone. Right, so moving on to the next item, please, is the budget for first half of the year.
Thank you, Chair. So the report reflects the financial position as at the end of September of this year. If I can draw your attention to the new sheet paper I've provided, the other one's far too small. So we're currently showing a year-to-date favourable variance of nearly 55,000, or just over it.
Yeah.
Just over, sorry. There aren't any new material variances to report on. The main variances remain the same as we last discussed in our meeting in September, which are the vacant post in the town ranger team and the increased investment income, which is described in 3.13 and 14. The only slightly different thing that I'd like to draw the committee's attention to is the request for a revirement in section 4. So revirement is a transfer of funds between budgets, which has a net nil impact. So it's just because it's over 10,000 in our financial regulations, we need to seek approval from either CPF or council for those. So we received a section 106 payment of 32,000 and we must spend that on improvements. 16,000 to Park Hall, 10,000 to Batton Springs Reserve and 6,000 to the Marquis Meadow play area. I think that's the only different thing compared to what you saw in September, but happy to take any questions.
Can I have a question, which is Lydeck car park under our expenditure? So 88 spaces, we pay £25,000, favourable variance of 60 grand. That's payment to.
So the main costs there are to the district council for the enforcement in the car park and the machines and the business rates that we have to pay in the car park.
And if we net that out, where I know we have the income and we could sort of Lydeck as part of the commercial income, the 330,000. How much of the 330,000 is Lydeck car park?
It's 50,000 for the normal spaces and there's probably another 5 for the business permits that we offer.
Okay. Quite good to understand with all of the discussion that's ongoing as to what we think. I'm just trying to do in my head what the revenue is per space in there and the cost per space for all of the traffic warnings that are in that car park.
What is the enforcement cost again?
Enforcement costs are around
20 grand.
probably slightly less than that. I think it might be like closer to 15, maybe a bit lower, but I can certainly double.
Yeah, if you could share that with us after the meeting, yes, please.
So I think the
Also-
park's got a.
Okay.
Yeah, just wanted to make just a couple of like context points on Lydekker. So, first of all, throughout the years, we've resisted, or the town council's resisted any charges at weekends. As the first point, and secondly, the town council has historically not increased the fees in line with the district council fees. So you'll see that our actually per hour payment is a lot less than the district's at the moment, and that's because of a decision historically to see that as a really important local asset for the high street. So that's why if you looked at the figures, it's kind of lower than elsewhere. So the surplus is about 30 grand. In the last probably 2 years or so, we've had lots of conversations. Well, let me rephrase that. Before this year and all of their changes that they're proposing, in the kind of the 18 months before that, we'd had quite a lot of conversations around management fees, because there was the fee was fixed at a pretty decent rate for a period of time, but they wanted to increase it. But when we would see the enforcement figures that used to come for every month, the enforcement figures in terms of trips or visits to the car park didn't equate to the management fee. So prior to the proposals coming forward earlier this year, we were having discussions about them sort of justifying the enforcement side of things. So that's the bit.
I guess that's where my question is going, which is for that 25 grand we're paying the district council, are we really getting value for money as the town council? Because I've certainly never seen any enforcement in that car park.
Yeah, so it's not 25 grand. So the enforcement is about 14.5, 15 grand. That's what we pay to them. So what we could see happen once the current sort of proposals that they're working through, they may be coming back to us with this management fee isn't high enough. So there will be a decision down the line, I think, for the town council to consider how it wants to enforce that car park itself. So yeah, so that just a bit of context to that. But the question to enforcement is, we don't get what we historically didn't get what we were paying for in terms of enforcement. And interestingly, last year they stopped sharing the monthly enforcement figures with us. And one of the observations that we were seeing quite regularly is that, and I'll just kind of make the numbers off on my top of my head, but we'd look at the numbers for like a monthly visits to Bowers Way, for example, and there might be 150, and you would expect that they would then walk further down the high street to Lydekker, but the equivalent visits to Lydekker was like 28, 30, that sort of difference. And so we challenged some of that, and there was an improvement. But as I say, this was going last year, and then obviously the events of this year have focused them on other things.
Do we have the agreement to pay those is presumably is it an SLA or?
That's correct, yeah, and historically we've held back the timing of paying the SLA at times whilst we've sought additional information and clarity, should we say.
So Carl, those numbers that you gave, about 150 visits to Bowers Way and say 30 to Lydekker, what's the time period for that? Is that per year or?
Yeah, so Richard, ignore the exact numbers. Then I think the ratio of the difference is the important thing. So, for every time they were visiting Bowers Way, they'd probably visit Lydekker every fifth time. It was around that sort of ratio. So I can't remember the exact figures off the top of my head because we haven't had them for a long time. But it was that sort of gap really that we couldn't really kind of get our head around why they weren't just moving further down the high street to go in, which obviously we could make an assumption why, because it's not their income.
Yeah. And you're saying that they've the district have stopped sending us regular sort of enforcement data on number of visits and so on.
So what used to happen last year, for a period of time, they would send all ward councillors monthly enforcement figures. So it'd be listed by car park across the whole district. And as part of that, they started to copy in town and parish councils. Now, a skeptic might think that once there was questions being raised around those enforcements, all of a sudden we no longer receive the data on a monthly basis. We received it as part of the SLA when we requested it, but perhaps it wasn't so forthcoming every month. Yeah, out of interest, if it is of interest, we can share with you a sample of what that looked like in the past to see the sorts of things that were shared, and you can see a very high level discrepancies in visits.
I think it'd be very useful to.
Yeah,
to see.
yes, please, Carl. I think that's a very helpful offer. We'd like to see that, please. Question: is there not in the SLA? Is there not an obligation on the district council to provide those regular reports to the town council?
Yeah, so the obligation is to provide them over a certain periodically, but not monthly in the way that they used to provide this additional data. So, as I understand it, and obviously I'm not being employed by the district council, I don't know whether this is 100% true, but when they brought the service in-house, quite often what happens is when you go through in local government anyway and bring in stuff in-house from an external contractor, certainly on the people side of things with TUPE, you quite often get some of the people or the roles that might be a bit of a problem. So if you look historically at when they brought it back in-house, there's been quite a significant lag in recruitment, gaps in posts, and so that's what was put down to some of the early issues when the contract was brought back in, which must be at least 3 years ago now. And so I think it's probably fair to say that some of the areas outside of the city centre, if you looked at the data, one could assume that the focus on the city centre and the outlying areas didn't get the levels of enforcement that they had previously.
Sorry, you finished that.
No,
I thought you finished.
Please go ahead.
My question was picking up on something Alistair said earlier, which was the income. And you might have said this already, so I'm sorry if I missed it. Of the 346, what is from Lydecker alone?
About 50,000 for the actual spaces.
Yeah,
And
so it's about 55 in total.
Yeah.
Just from Lydecker, and the rest is from the other areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask first? Also, you said business rates. So we pay the district council business. Where does the business rates come in? That we pay them business rates because we're running a business in.
car park. Yeah, so all car parks are
Considered a
Rates.
business.
they
Okay.
so no matter if the car park was completely free, so some of the
Land, isn't it?
yeah, the small car park in Southdown as an example,
Yeah.
district own and run that, but have to pay business rates on it, even though it's not a chargeable car.
So even if it's just a bit of land, what about is it the land car park on?
Farmland.
Yeah, it's just, so that's just not even, that's just like a space where people park. Does that have to pay business rates too?
That's not been chargeable, I think, because it's part of the common. Yeah,
Okay, so it's.
We don't pay business rates for the common.
no.
So it's a silly question.
And,
Okay.
and even the spaces that are down here, because these spaces off this road are HTC, aren't they?
Which one? What on?
Just outside
Just
here.
outside here, on the opposite side of the
I
road.
think on the common, I think you've referred to. I think you got a point in the other direction.
That way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
That's the car
Yeah, can I
park.
just make a couple of points on that actually? Yeah, so where the town council has historically made parking available on the common, that's slightly different in the sense of the type of land that's treated at in a business rate sense. If you put a building on the common, then depending on what the type of building was, you would then be liable for business rates. The important thing just to say is that I'm sure you're aware of this. Business rates is collected by St Albans District Council, but it goes centrally into government and then it's redistributed. So St Albans only get a very small percentage back of what they collect on behalf of government. It's just worth saying that. And I think just the other thing to say is if you was to look historically at Lydecker car park income, whilst we've recovered post-COVID pretty well, we aren't up to the levels we were before COVID. And the reason I make that point is because that would already indicate that if you look at the high street in terms of parking, it's already suffered in recent years as a result of COVID. Car parks hasn't recovered. anecdotally, we hear that footfall isn't as high as it was before COVID. So, you know, this wider hot topic, you can see that the danger is here is that these proposals will only further impact upon a tough 5 or 6 years in any case. And I make that point linked to our Lydeca car park income.
Do we have any data? I mean,
Evidence, isn't it?
I've sat in Lydeca a number of times doing calls because I'm slightly sad like that. And I think the level of payment of people who park in there during the week is very low. I also think that is true of Bowers Way. Do we have any data to that? I mean, anecdotally, I can sit there for 3 hours and I haven't seen a single person use the machine to pay.
And a bit like anecdotally, I see a car parking for 3 days on the bit where you're meant to pay, spend 1 hour.
Yeah.
I mean, again, it's anecdotal.
And I just, and the bit I'm trying to get to is one could argue that if they were managing their car parking spaces in a better way, and our space for that matter, that there would be a significant improvement in revenue both to us and the district council. I wonder, for example, it could be done quite simply by just you can put a pneumatic, basically a car counter. So you put 2 pneumatic tubes across, and at the end of the month, you count how many cars went in and how many people paid. And I would hazard a guess that they are extremely different.
Very different numbers.
And that might well be a useful statistic for us to know as to how effective they are at policing our car park.
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting point. So, I mean, it's okay, let's call it subjective, but subjectively, the enforcement isn't as good as it should be in Harpenden. So you could assume, therefore, that there may be an element of underpaying, over parking in Lydeca. We have actually carried out some studies before and looked at the data, partly because we're a bit sad like that, and we want to make sure that we're not getting a bad deal off external contracts like enforcement. So the last time we did that, when we carried out a utilisation study, so what we had is we had and this was to produce a car parking strategy for Harpenden, funny enough, a number of years ago. What we did is we did a utilisation study of every off-street car park and a number of streets around Harpenden, including Lydeca. So when we looked at Lydeca, the utilisation figures that we saw were broadly in line with anecdotally what we felt was in there, but we cross-referenced them to the transaction data on the machines. So we were able to look at the specific, the number of transactions, the type of transactions. And all I can say is back then when we did that, which must have probably been 2019, slightly before COVID, I think, the numbers all matched up. So it kind of felt right then. But clearly, we're 5 years down the line now. So, though that sort of data capture might be a useful exercise to explore.
I think it would potentially be a useful exercise to carry out both in any negotiation we have with the district council around their SLA contract, but also just so that we know roughly how that is used. I suspect capturing that data is not actually that expensive an exercise to do.
Okay, is that something we could authorise through this committee, Carl?
No, it isn't. No, because it's not something that's linked to your agenda today. But there's 2 ways of doing it. So first of all, I've just made a note. We're just going to go and explore the costs of it. So if the costs aren't prohibitive, then we can just do it within our normal operations and have that as useful data to have. If I find that it is costly beyond the financial regs, then we can just bring that back as part of a conversation at council later this month when you've got the parking discussion. But I would imagine that it wouldn't be cost prohibitive, so we could probably just crack on with it afterwards.
How would we get access to people's payments on the app? Because it's not just payments at the machine, is it, in Lydeca?
We presumably can work it back through or ask for the data on the basis of the revenue that we're being provided by the district council.
Yeah, so the last time we did this, a large percentage of the transactions weren't cash at that point. So we just got the data through their back office systems then. So
And they're happy
It's-
to provide that.
Happy, it's probably loose, but they have to, yeah.
Just to add to that, when would a sensible time and moment be in the right place, Carl, to have a discussion about bringing the control of it back into Harpenden or into Harpenden? Monitoring of it, etc.
So the enforcement at Lydekker.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's part of the conversation at the next council meeting. So
perfect.
what we've said all along is, once we know what may or may not happen with the district parking policies or the proposals, the town council needs to do one of two things. First of all, it will need to decide what it wants to do in response to those. And
Yeah.
secondly, in terms of how it might challenge that, but secondly, what it then may wish to do with its own assets to where we do have direct control, where we might be able to do things differently that might offset, any issues and things like that. So the start of that conversation is for council next time. To be honest, this month, yeah, a lot of the thinking and the scenario planning has been done behind the scenes for that.
Excellent.
Can I ask a question about ANPR, Carl? So have you considered sort of potentially installing ANPR at Lydekker?
Yeah, so councils can't use ANPR cameras under the current legislation. So you still need mobile enforcement, either a vehicle going around or a person going around. So the only way that a local authority can utilise ANPR is to kind of capture the in and out side of things. Like, you can't use the ANPR then to issue enforcement. So if you look at the district recent approval for the new ANPR vehicle, one vehicle going around the whole of the district, that on street can do the enforcement side of things. Off street, it needs to be supported by a body, a human, or a human, basically, the way they run it at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. And so just to clarify the details, so the councils can't directly install that ANPR, but if we subcontracted the management of a car park to a third party like Euro Parks or whoever it was, could they use ANPR as part of their management contract for the car park?
I would have to just check back on that question. So I'd have to just check back whether if you are subcontracting it out, whether that does give you a way around the legislation. I doubt it does, because I'm just thinking back to when it used to be an external contract. I think they still had the same ANPR issues back then. And when there were conversations around the use of ANPR at the new Amenbury Lane car park when the leisure centre was built, that was one of the reasons why that couldn't be brought forward at that point. So let me just double check that, but I suspect that isn't a workaround, because it'd still be local authority owned.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, Carl. Very good. So any further questions on the subject of parking or any other items on?
Not parking, but I'm sorry, I did have some questions only for my clarification on the budgetary control. So 3.1, there's the figure of 1.948740 in your report. And I just want to know whether it's something that we've got wrong that we need to think about for next year, or try and head off any issues that we might have. Because so at 3.1, we've got the original budget was set, and then at 3.6, we've got the changes to the budget, meaning that we're now 2,889,080, and that's a big jump up, isn't it?
Yeah.
So have we done something wrong, which means that we're 940,000 out, or are there sort of easy explanations as to how that's jumped up, and is that something that happens all the time, or are we going to be in the same position next year going, oh crikey, there's 940,000 that's gone somewhere?
It's something that happens every year.
Right.
So it's where, so the difference between the two are all of the big projects that we're going to carry out. So, for example, the purchase of the depot or the building of the pavilion aren't built into the original budget, but we know we're gonna, those funds have been allocated, so it's created an increase in the revised budget. So between the two, so on page,
So it's quite legitimate to have increases in those figures during the course of a financial year. That's obviously my ignorance. These guys obviously know all of that already, but that's a totally acceptable thing to happen.
so yeah, so if you look on page 18,
Yeah,
you've got a breakdown of all of the projects where funds have been allocated for them.
yeah,
So that's the difference between the two, but all of those projects are just one-off. So that's why they're not built into the base budget. If there's something that was an ongoing
Yeah.
expenditure,
Yeah.
then that would have to be built into the base. But
From a company's point of view, it's weird, but it seems to be how public accounting works from a company. point
oh,
of view.
okay, so it's not a completely stupid question.
Yeah.
That's nicely reassuring. Thank you,
Not-
Dan. Thank you.
So is it simplistic to say that the original budget is sort of operating expenditure and the variation is sort of capital expenditure, more sort of project, one-time project based?
yeah, one-off projects and as well to show changes to the budget as well, like the environment that I mentioned earlier, where you've got extra expenditure, but there's extra income that offsets that. So,
Yeah, so I mean,
That shouldn't increase because you've just said.
no, there's a net nil.
Yeah, I say we're just shifting money about with the environment, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And then, sorry, so leading, sorry.
Sorry, no, I was going to say, Councillor Flint.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if I just add how I work it in my head, because I'm not an accountant, and sometimes my explanations might help or maybe not. So 3.1 really is helpful to consider. There's another word that should be in there. So the original general budget, yeah, so similar to what Richard's kind of saying there around operation, was the 1.948. The 3.6 is the general budget plus things that are funded through reserves, basically. So that's the difference. So the 3.6 you flagged.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say, we got even more.
No. I mean, it would be nice to have more, but maybe that's a conversation for another day. But the paragraph 3.6, where we've got the 2.9 million, so that includes reserves that are being used within this year to fund priorities. So it's so the 3.1, see that as the general budget. So when you look at the next report, you're being asked to look at you're looking at the latest position on the general budget, and it's completely bizarre the way it works in local government. Things that are presented in red are different to what you see in other ways, minuses and pluses, and it's just very bizarre. But that's the way to look at it. The bigger figure is with the reserves that we're utilising. The smaller figure is just the general budget.
Okay,
I think that's right, Dan. Yeah.
Right, okay, that definitely helps. Okay, and then my next question was in relation to the spend on the storage depot. Seems like a lot has gone above and beyond what me personally, and again, there might be very good explanations for why storage depots need so much money spending on them, but it's a shed, a glorified shed, isn't it, a storage depot? And I can't get excited about it, I'm sorry, but we're now at 277,000. So we had a premium, didn't we, of about 106,000, I think, something like that. There's the figure of 35, and then we've got nearly £250,000 on a storage depot, and I really was just wondering how we've got so excited and spent so much money on a storage depot.
So the 243, that's for the purchase of the site, and the 35 on the storage depot. That hasn't been decided exactly yet what it's going to be spent on, but it'll be for things like CCTV and bringing it back up to a decent standard where it's not a particularly good standard at the minute is what that will be funded.
So to Councillor Fisher's point, would it be helpful just to add a little bit more description? So there's the purchase or the acquisition of the depot is one charge, and then additional spend on refurb and upgrades and safety equipment and security is maybe.
Yeah.
It just says storage depot at the
Yeah,
moment. It's
yeah,
hard
that's
to
what
sort of
that's
Yeah.
figure it.
I'm still struggling to see how we've got so excited and spent so much money on a storage depot. I mean, I understand that we need CCTV and it needs to be safe for the people working in it and things like that, but
It just feels
I'm
like,
assuming it's the land cost.
is it land and building?
Yes, it's everything around that site, like the track along the side, and it's a key purchase for any future.
It makes a big
Aspirations.
difference to the pitch, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Because then they can use the new pavilion, can't they? Because they can get across from that bit of land, whereas before they couldn't, I think. So that's,
the district. So, Clark got a point to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, I mean, the first thing to say, council approved the purchase back in January. So the figure that you've got here is a council decision. The 106 that you refer to was the previous lease. So when the depot was first built, we had a 25-year lease, and as part of that, we were contributing £106,000 to that, which was probably a third of the price it would have cost us to do something elsewhere. So we were committed to the 106. As the grounds maintenance contract came in house through the town ranger service,
yeah.
the John O'Connor element of the building wasn't utilised anymore. So we had a conversation with the district to see whether they'd be up for selling the whole building. So essentially, the way of looking at it is for an extra £130,000 beyond what we were committing to, we've been able to, well, we will very soon be able to purchase a depot, which is key to our operations, which would have cost us probably an additional £150,000 to do ourselves.
See, I'm excited now, that's fine. Well, thank you. I have to go and see it now, so I heard so much about it.
I think you might be disappointed. I would build it up in your imagination and leave it there.
Yeah. I'll get our Christmas decorations on it, that's what I need to know.
It's a Superman shed.
So no, I think it's a good example of, I think, as Carl said, these have all been signed off and approved. I think if you could just help us with some of the descriptions,
sure.
it's a little bit more detail, and particularly when it's sort of the one-time purchase, is it the land, the building, upgrade, just a bit more detail in the description.
Of course, yeah, no problem.
Very good. Okay, Councillor Fisher, thank you for your questions as always. Any further questions on the budgetary control policy, please?
No.
Okay, so we're being asked to note the reports, approve the vehement in section 4 and note the release of the reserves. I'm happy to vote on all three items if everyone else is. All those in favour of all three items, please raise your hand. Thank you, everybody. Very good. Okay, next item is our second look at the budget. So, Danny, can you walk us through that, please?
Thank you, Chair. So where a budget is often considered a best guess, it is always changing based on the latest information. There's been a material change since the report's been written. So on page 21, there's a table that explains the variances that were known at the time of writing, which would have created a precept increase of 6.91%, as is quoted in paragraph 5.2. But based on the budget, the national insurance changes that were reported will increase the budget by a further 20,000, which will increase the precept to 8.2%.
And my understanding from the bits around the budget was that part of the budget was that she was going to provide funding for the public sector, basically, of their part of the NI. Does that, was she lying, or does that flow through to our levels?
There may be some grant available at some point that will be applicable to us. I wouldn't have thought so, but you never know.
So I think she, in the numbers, she net off 5 billion, saying that was funding required for funding the public sector employees who were.
So there was more NI that could have been charged, is my understanding, or in the private sector will be charged, where NI will be applicable to employers' pension contribution, whereas that.
No, I don't think so. So, sorry, I think it's purely the rate down to 5,000 and the 13.8 up to 15.
Right, okay.
But my understanding from the various bits around it was that part of the deal she's done is that she will compensate the public sector employees so that it isn't any stress on public sector, like NHS, etc. budgets. And I just wondered, we're at the very bottom of the sort of tree, if you like, for that. Does it flow through, or not? Or are we really, do we have to pick it up from the taxpayer?
I've not had any communications about any grants that are going to be coming in. So I think Clark wants to say,
Yeah, so you won't be surprised to know that there's nothing going to be passed down to our part of the sector. And in fact, there's some question marks as to what's going to be passed down to principal authorities. So we've had confirmation today that the Treasury announcement around funding the burden, let's call it, won't pass down to our part of the sector. And it will only link through to where there are existing central government grant fundings in place. So of course, town and parishes aren't in that position, and actually that doesn't necessarily mean that all of the public sector will receive the money back that it's going to cost them. Just if you're interested, there's been a swell of town councils today, including ours, which has made representation to the Secretary of State's department. To say that some of this burden should pass down. So for our sector, we think it's about £10 million, which is not a huge amount of money in comparison to elsewhere, but it's relative. Some of my colleagues elsewhere have been hit with a £40,000-50,000 additional burden to find out of nowhere when they're already partway through funding or finalising their budget for next year. But the one thing I would say is that any representations that our sector makes to government on these sorts of things where we're asking for parity, I'm often quite a lone voice with my colleagues elsewhere in urging a bit of caution, because in some ways we don't have parity on other things, so we don't have the restrictions that other parts of local government have. So in my head, if we ask for all the good stuff, we've got to be careful not to get the restrictions too. So the short answer is we're not going to get any money passed down, and it's likely that a number of principal authorities aren't as well.
I think it's worth for the record of the minutes that that's the fact.
Thank you.
Any further questions on the second look on the budget?
Well, I mean, what do you think about 8.2%?
Okay, can I just ask, just to help sort of get us to that, an answer to that? I mean, just maybe I'm making 2 + 2 = 5 or 3. So in 5.3, we state this is a £20,000 cost estimate. And we know that in our previous budget look, we have an unfilled vacancy that's contributing to a 23,000 favourable variance. So one option is we simply just cut that vacancy from the budget for the next year. We're running the operation without any harm to the services. So it'd be great to have that. Are these an apprentice vacancy? Is that? Yes, that'd be great to have that. And I don't mean to inflict pain on the community from the government budget, but obviously if our goal might be to keep the precept at 6.9% as opposed to going to 8.2, then the obvious candidate would be that position. Which is not filled, it's in the budget, we're already running a variance, a positive variance. So why not hold the precept at 6.9%? We just cut our cloth for next year. Clark, answer that one.
Yeah, so clearly it's an option. So when there are budget pressures, we have to look at how we want to fund them. So in terms of that Town Ranger service, that is a vital resource for the Town Ranger service. So the reality is if council removes any existing funding or absorbs pressures in that way, the quality and volume of what we deliver against our business plan will go down. So we are already an incredibly lean council. If you look at the figures that we've included in the appendix, the amount of money that we raise from council tax already comparatively to elsewhere is incredibly low. So yes, it is absolutely an option. You can look at ways in which you address gaps by stop doing some things and stop having certain roles, but you won't be able to do that without losing the quality and the volume of what we do. And so you would see a difference in outputs.
So I don't deny that, Carl, but this is a vacant. You don't have that person is not there. It is a vacant position, and your team are performing their services today without that person being on the pitch. So we're not asking you to cut the team. It's simply there's just a budget item there that is not being spent. It's a positive variance. This just allows us to hold that precept at 6.9%.
Yeah, so there's a very deliberate reason why that post hasn't been filled, and that's because we want to go through a 12-month cycle of running the service to know where best to place that capacity. So at the moment, the town ranger service isn't operating at capacity. If you look, for example, this week we've had 1 out of 5 town rangers available, which does have a direct impact on the output. So that resource is important to deliver the service that's been agreed. And we wouldn't be able to deliver the level of service without that bit of resource. We've just taken the wise decision to pause where we want to best place that resource. So, for example, if we recruit an apprentice on a generic town ranger role, and having run the service for 12 months, we find out that we need something that's a bit more specific or a bit different, and that's why we've held back, so that we're reviewing where it's best placed to put that. So, as I say, of course, the council can decide to look at those sorts of things. And we will, in our officer sort of recommendations, put the pros and the cons to doing that.
Are there any other recommendations, or is this just a bit too soon?
Sorry, in terms of,
What are the recommendations on how we either earn back that 20k or save money elsewhere?
no, so the way in which we run our budget setting is we do this first and second look approach. So
Okay.
what you presented today is the current position based on what we're aware of. There are still a lot of variables. The biggest one being that early December we find out what the tax base is for next year. So the figures that you've got here are based on a 0 increase in the tax base. So very rarely does the tax base not go up, unless the district council change the calculations, which they did one year. So, you know, I would expect that 8.2 as it is now to go down once we're aware of what the tax base figure is, and we'll be aware of that in early December. So when you come to your meeting in January, all of the unknowns, barring the salary increases for next year, will be known. So at that point, you know, if you look at it and go, you're not happy with what that percentage is, then you can look at options at that point. I mean, equally, you could task the council now to look at options to bring that down to a certain level. In doing that,
I don't think we know. I've got enough information yet before we make that decision.
Just an interest on the numbers you've put here, because this is for next year. Does it assume a pay rise? Because obviously one of the other ways that a number of businesses will be dealing with this is by effectively flowing it back into the employees by curtailing pay rises against the NI.
yeah, well, we're part of a national agreement on
Yeah.
terms and conditions, so that's all agreed nationally, which is one of the reasons why we can't always forecast it, because it's normally done 8 to 9 months in arrears, sometimes sooner.
I mean, Carl, just returning. So again, thank you for the responses, Carl. But I think just going back to the apprentice role, I think coming back to, and you've made your point very well, but I think I would like to see a very clear job description for that role for the next financial year to keep it in the budgets. I mean, optically, 6.9% is already, to me, quite a it's an above inflation increase. To go to a further 8.2%, however justified by the NI, that's another load on the local taxpayer. So I think if we are going to want to keep that role in the budget, Carl, I want to see a very clear sort of signed off job description for that. I do take your argument that we're sort of figuring out the operations, we're going to work out exactly what we need, but I think, you know, the clock's ticking. I would like to see, you know, you've got to come back to us and say, well, okay, we understand the operations, the job we need this person to fulfill looks like this.
I think that's
So
what,
we need that in place for the next budget round.
but that's what Carl said was waiting to do, isn't it?
Well, I think so. I'm just about tying up the completion of the job description with the approval of the budget. Because I think
the job description is already there. The post already exists. What we've decided to do is not recruit to it, just to make sure that the post that we designed is the right post. So that's it. The job description is there, and we can kind of share that. But we want to be comfortable that the last thing I want to do is recruit to that, and it be the worst, a bad use of resources.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah,
will be in a
that's
better
exactly-
position come January
Yeah.
to do that. But any change like that will come with a significant health warning about what we would expect to then produce for the town in terms of output.
Okay, so I think can I just ask for an action, please? I think just linking to that, to the approval of the budget January, I personally would like to see that, and I take your point about the job description, Carl, you've got version 1, but I would like to see your final version of that job description that you want to confirm in the budget. That needs to be reconfirmed based on the learnings from the operation in time for the January budget. Otherwise, I'm going to have to come back and say, look, you've we've got these extra 20k of cost pressure here. You don't have this role in place. We still don't have a job description. I'm going to find it quite hard to justify a job that we still can't define come January.
I think the numbers are going to move again. That's what my understanding was from.
I'm sure they are, but I'm
Actually,
just trying to.
the 8.2 might not be an 8.2 by the time we get to the end of January. So I think it's good to have everything there so we can make a decision in January. If that's what you're implying. So,
Yeah, and
have more clarity on where we want to place that role currently
correct.
on hold.
So whether it's 8.2 or 9.2, the concern I have still remains.
Yeah, I'm.
I
If it's
accept.
over 8, I'm concerned as well, but it might be 7.2, in which case we might have.
That's fine. I accept Carl's argument that they've got a certain job description and they're learning the operation. So I buy that operational reality. But for me to personally sort of not have to push back again in January, I would like to see a finalised job description. Well, you tell me that you have finalised the job description. Could we just note that as an action? Please say that.
Okay, so it was live, even if it's not live at the moment, it has been live and there is a job description. How many applications have you had?
No, we haven't recruited to it.
No, I know,
So-
but how many applications have you had?
No, we haven't gone out to recruitment for the role.
Oh, you haven't gone out for
Yeah.
recruitment, I see what you're saying, sorry. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
got you.
so it's a
Yeah,
role
yeah,
that
thank you.
it's the role we built into the service,
Yes.
but we've
I
held back
understand
because quite often with apprentice roles to start with, they're quite time intensive. And so we
Yeah.
didn't want the Newtown Ranger service to be serving an apprentice rather than getting on and doing the job. I think the action I've got the action you're noting there, Richard. I think it's more complicated than you might feel because in effect, what you're asking us to do is to potentially identify that value of savings in the staff structure. So what we might have to come back with is saying, if that post is crucial and you're the principal is you want to look at savings in the staff structure, I have to find you other ways to do that. So what you're asking for is quite complicated and it does have quite a few knock-on effects to the piece of work that we would have to do.
Councillor,
No, I've got another point.
okay, so just to get to a resolution on this, but I mean, to me, it's actually relatively simple. You have a vacancy in the team with a job description, with a budget allocation that's approximately 20,000. You told me that you want to update the job description based on operational learnings. I buy that. We have faced a 20,000 cost increase on our budget based on national insurance increases. We are trying our best to get the right level of precepts that we can justify to local council tax holders. I'm just specifically asking you, Carl, that I think the clock is ticking on that budget line item. If you can't confirm a job description that you can validate, say, okay, we need this person to do this specific job, you know, that vacancy, that budget, that line item can't be there forever. You know, we can't be charging council tax to local residents for a job that isn't filled, that isn't defined on an ongoing basis. The clock has to stop at some point. I don't think it's a particularly difficult or onerous request, but I think, you know, come back to say January, if that is the approval of the budget, I would like to see that job description updated and or finalised.
So my guess on what I'm hearing you're saying, Carl, is actually the service isn't being carried out at 100% at the moment, and you think you need more resource to get to the point where you're doing the full service. I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, so 100% full service includes utilising the resource for that apprentice town ranger. So we've deliberately been not recruited the full capacity to what the council approved the business plan for, to try to be diligent to make sure that we use it in the right way. But I completely understand the point, and we can come back on that. But what I also don't want to do is take a decision operationally on that post for the sake of the thought of not losing the money, and that's the knock-on effect to what we're being asked. So in theory, we could go and recruit to that post next week, and then that we would have an issue. So I think the wider principle, I think, for committee to consider is there and how we would have done this in the past is there a maximum level of precept that you would want us to work to? Because that's a better way of looking at it, because then we can come in January with ways in which we can get the precept to the level. That's how we did it last year. So if that's the issue, I wouldn't make it about a staffing post, because that is quite complicated in the sense of the knock-on effect to existing staff as well, potentially. If it's around you're happy with 6.9% and the next time this comes to you, we don't want it to be any higher than that, then that's a different way of us presenting how you are kept within an option that you're happy with.
So for me, that makes sense, because I fear that it's convenient that we've got a role at effectively of the right amount of money, and to get rid of that might be easy and convenient and the right thing, but actually it's tactical, it's not strategic. We're not looking at the whole piece and going, actually, can we increase revenue here to offset that, or actually we might want to get rid of a role elsewhere because that requirement's going down, whereas this one's absolutely needed. So my instinct is we take it up a level, as Carl suggests, and we look at what do we want it to be, what's our target, or within a range that we're comfortable with, and then how do we achieve that? There might be a mix of ideas, and part of it might be revenue generation, because with my business growth hat on for the past 30 years, I would always go to how can I increase my revenue, what new products can I launch, etc., to maintain that and actually grow the staff base. And I know it's different here, but I don't see why we're just looking at cutting rather than kind of potentially increasing. I mean, maybe we should put parking on the high street and put that out there and charge for that, and that'll pay for the scallywag.
Can I ask a couple of slightly techy questions? Inflation. Is there a point in time where you change from RPI to CPI? Because obviously RPI is a dead index, stops being published from 2030, and most contracts now are moving to CPI, and presumably our contracts we're signing moving to CPI.
It's certainly something that we can do. It's not I think the 1% in inflation. I think
it's more a techie point.
Yeah.
But RPI generally, I think the view is shouldn't be used and should be converted to CPI. But obviously, CPI runs roughly 1% lower than RPI, so in the longer term.
Actually, in services contracts, you might even use a different index altogether, like labour costs or something.
So if you're uplifted by RPI, I think would be found on that. The second question I had was on rates, actually, and obviously there is some stuff that's come through around business rates again in the budget, some of which is positive-ish. And I just wondered what our overall rates bill was, because it's difficult to pick it out of here. And then what, if anything, do we do to challenge that rates bill? I'm thinking particularly around things actually like the car park, etc., because most of those rates bills would have just been indexing up. And I suspect our revenue, well, for certain, for example, on the car park, that's not the case. And there may actually be some relatively significant, depending what our overall rates bill is, there may be some reasonably significant savings. Certainly my experience is that when you challenge those things, there are savings, and frankly, there are people who can do that on a no fee or success basis.
So, give you a rough idea of how much business rates are.
Just whilst Dan's finding that, it's just worth saying that there were quite a lot of discretionary or additional reliefs that came in place after COVID, which we benefited from. Some of those have disappeared in recent times. The announcement last week might open opportunities to us again, particularly around leisure, community centres. But we also carry out our own reviews as well. So historically, for example, the building you're in, there used to be 3 or 4 separate business rate bills that came in, because one of it at one point was used as a back office, another was used by CAB. So periodically we've reviewed that as well to make sure we're paying what we should do. And I'm hopeful that some of the announcements last week might actually be fruitful to us, particularly on the leisure side of things, less so hospitality, but.
I think that, yeah, I think there are potential. I mean, it's increasingly a game that's played around rates until they end up finally reforming them. But I just wonder whether there isn't, and you can often get free advice on that without having to, and there are specialists who do it, without it being a cost or effort on us for them to come in and review what's possible.
Thank you. So it's 45,000 at the minute.
Yeah.
A year.
So, you know, getting a quarter off that or something go quite a long way. If the central government's going to stick us on one hand, we might as well stick them back with the other.
As we know though, and we sort of come across this, don't we? That councils operate differently and they have to operate within their like fixed rules, like auditing, all of the rest of it, like the salaries and stuff. There's specific guidance that they have to be very careful about sticking to. And I appreciate as a corporate business, you might go, right, well, we'll go to these guys because we know them. But I think councils are just slightly different.
I think
Don't
when you-
put too much pressure on them to spend loads of time
I think
finding a company that is allowed to work with councils. And then ultimately we get a result that we are legitimately allowed to use.
I think the easiest one though is you just challenge the rateable value of properties, which is just a case of effectively QS firm looking at what the rateable values are and challenging whether that is the correct rateable value. So I'm not sure it's not controversial per se.
Could it had the opposite?
Yeah.
No,
OQS couldn't come back and go, actually, we want 90 grand off you. No, okay, all right.
because if they come back with rateable values and they're higher, then you're not going to challenge it.
No, okay, right. Okay,
But I've helped charities do it as well. It's fertile ground.
Okay, so that's something we can take as an action, come out of this meeting, thank you. All right, so just to wrap this up, so Councillor, I totally take your point about, well, let's focus on the outcome and then allow our officers to work out how we get.
Detail, yeah.
No, that's a totally fair point.
can I just add, just while you're thinking aloud, so I asked Dan to remind me what the increase was last year, it was 8.4. So when I said, oh, 8.2 sounds a lot, I mean, we're not like, massively out from where we were last year, so that's just a little note.
Okay,
We
well, point that is a fact. I mean, I'm just, I think we do have a duty to balance service quality versus value for money. So we have to work both sides of that equation. I think any number is inherently arbitrary. Is 6.9 the right number? Is 8.2? I don't know. I don't know whether anyone else does. But I do think we need to push towards 6.9 if we can.
A tracker. We asked about last year. Did we see that last year? So we can see what it's been for like the last.
The precept increases.
Yeah. The last however many years. I know COVID might be a bit of a random. It just might give us an idea
For
of
the next meeting.
whether it's.
He probably knows, he's probably going to.
Just sort of conscious of time, so we have some other things to get through as well. So, and the ask is just to note the update from Dan. Are there any more questions or comments on this topic from the councillors before we move on?
Good.
Okay, thank you very much. So just raise your hands if you're able to note reports and the updates. Dan, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for the comments and questions, everybody. So moving on, the next item is our internal audit plan. And if you want to update us on that, please.
Thank you, Chair. So the appendix attached to the report shows the intended internal audit plan for this financial year. The committee may wish to note there's no changes to the plan. It was a successful plan that's previously, so it's worked, so we haven't made any changes. And I should be providing the internal auditors with the first set of sample data by the end of this week, but that's it really for me. Happy to take any questions.
Is this the report where they sort of published the framework on the front cover but didn't put the score again?
That's it.
I think we just asked, well, if you want to put the framework in, please add the score to the front cover of the report.
Yeah.
Any comments or questions from the
Okay.
group here? Okay, all those willing to note the report, please raise your hand. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Next item is external audits. And we're being asked to recommend that the recommend to council that we approve the annual audit. What is it? Annual governance and accountability return. So Daniel, can you walk us through, please?
Thank you. So this is just basically the final piece of the puzzle for last financial year's accounts. And I'm pleased to say we've got a clean bill of health.
Hold on.
Any comments or questions, please?
No.
Okay, all of those willing to approve the recommendation to council, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. Next item, it's be asked to note the update on the work by the Working Party for Supporting Vulnerable People. Please, please.
Yes, yeah, thank you. So this report is an update on the work that the Supporting Vulnerable People Working Party has carried out. Since its formation in November last year, it evolved from the Dementia Friendly Harpenden initiative. So the Working Party is focused on three key areas: the Dementia Friendly Harpenden, young people's mental health, and Batford as a neighbourhood. So we've continued to support the dementia friendly initiatives, including the Harpenden Memory Lane Cafe and awareness talks. For young people's mental health, we are collaborating with organisations like Youth Talk to address funding challenges and reduce waiting times for services. And in Batford, we've conducted a community survey to identify the needs and coordinating with organisations to avoid duplicating efforts. So funding recommendations will be discussed by the Working Party in January, with a further report to this committee and potential council later on next year.
It was really sad to note from the minutes and from this that the Youth Talk people didn't quite think that the Batford facility that we could offer was quite right for them, because that would have been so lovely that if we could have tied all of those things up. Because I think I'd be wrong, but I think there will be a few people, in the Batford area that would have really appreciated a facility like that.
Yeah.
So if there is a facility that people know about, they, I think, should contact the Youth Talk, and then the Working Party can have a look at that, see if they can support them.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Just regarding the survey on Batford, so page 311, so I do take your point that many of the items raised were not in our jurisdiction, but did we share the report and the recommendations to the relevant bodies, such as the district council, county council, etc.?
I think it has
Yeah, I
been
think
some collaboration. Yeah.
Okay.
Got a duty to do that, haven't we, if we think that areas of concern. Restricting Council 3.13 in addition to the local thing.
Okay, very good. Any further comments or questions on the Working Party, please? All of those in favour of noting the reports, please raise your hand. Thank you, everyone. Next item is our update on citizens' advice. Please, Danny, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report presents quarter two, which is July to September of this year. Might be worth noting that in the table we show that we've helped, or they've helped 134 clients with 376 different issues, but they have to take any questions. It's the report's in the same format it normally is.
Same, roughly the same as last year, isn't it? So, yeah.
The good work continues.
Yeah.
Any comments or questions from the? Okay, all of those in favour of noting the report, please raise your hand. Thank you very much. And the next item is our health and safety policy. Please, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. So the report presents a review of the health and safety policy that was last looked at by this committee in November 2022. Obviously, the policy is reviewed regularly just to make sure it's still fit for purpose and meeting any changes in legislation. But ultimately, there hasn't been any major changes to the policy, but happy to take any questions.
Who is responsible for drafting and updating that? Is there an outside body that you consult with?
We've sought advice in the past to help shape the document, but it's something that changes for us and we can make it suit our needs and add bits to it where we need to. So, for example, if we wanted to emphasise something on lone working or smoking or something like that, we can put more emphasis in the document that, as we feel. So we have to be sure that we're covering all of the legislation that we need to, but we can still tailor it to any specific requirements that we might have.
Because the big change from 2022 to now is that we have our in-house ranger team, don't we? So
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that had been taken into account, but I didn't know whether you consulted or whether it's something that actually all councils get support with through the, like the training and things like that.
I think for the training that the new rangers have done, they've done lots of training on, say, chainsaws or the use of the new equipment and things like that. So all of that's been done as part of the creation of the team. It's not specifically noted in the policy, but that has been done to make sure that we're meeting all the legislation and looking after our staff.
Okay. So you're satisfied that it's up to date and as comprehensive as it should be?
Yeah.
How does I didn't find any explicit reference to home working or working from home. And I don't know if that's a material working practice within the town, within the office of the town council.
It's not something that's picked up in this policy. I think there's a separate flexible working policy that we have.
No, I was thinking, so just in my environment, so if I work at home, I'm expected to take an annual test to make sure that my monitor's at a certain height and my legs are at a certain angle. I've got a chair that's fit my basis to stop sort of posture problems at work, and I have to do a regular sort of annual sort of 10-minute online test. I don't know, do you have any things that so people aren't working from home, how many people do work from home on a regular basis? Are there any sort of sensible, pragmatic things that we do just to ensure that people are sort of, managing their posture and taking regular breaks?
With someone with awful posture, I can.
Well, yeah, there you go. Right, so I think the clerks, but please, Carl.
Yeah, so it's a very good point. So essentially, the flexible working policy sets out the health and safety elements of remote working as well. So interestingly, you'd probably be aware that if someone works remotely, that doesn't remove our responsibility to them, actually. So it's always a fine line between, because remote working very much here is seen as a privilege rather than a right. So there's always a careful balance between providing the right things to enable someone to work at home without incurring significant costs. So yeah, it's all set out in the flexible working policy. We do the display screen assessments. The other thing with it is quite often some people have got certain spaces at home that might not necessarily be equivalent to, a certain size desk that you might have at the office. So you have to make, certain mitigations. But we consider all that, look at it all. We assess that when we first moved to a remote working policy. We did a lot of assessments around that, and we continue to.
Okay, right, thank you. Okay, any more questions, comments from the committee, please? Okay, so we've been asked to note and review the policy, proposing comments or amendments, and then approve the policy. So is that to approve or to ask?
Approving.
Yeah.
All of those in favour of approving, please raise your hand. Very good, thank you very much. And I think the last item is 7.9, which is a community grant fund application from Stephanie Community Church.
I have one question on this. And the question was, they're asking for £2, and it sounds like a good idea. But when I look at their budget, they are spending £8,000 a year on accommodation. I just wondered what our policy and thoughts were around, rather than providing them with £2,000 of cash, providing them with accommodation, good value of accommodation. I suppose the part of my thinking around that was you certainly get a bit more credit seeing them do things within those accommodations. And from what I can tell, the accommodations they're using are central Harpenden, so it's not where we don't already have a presence. I just wondered the benefiting kind of it potentially felt like a better way of supporting them.
I think we'd certainly have our facilities open to them, and we do provide our facilities to other organisations. I think when I read through the application, they mentioned, so on page 64 at the top in item 11, that they're undertaking a large building project at present. So I think
it seems to be that
That's the one in Cold Harbour Lane.
it's basically, isn't it? It's St George's School they're using, and it's the Salvation Army Home.
And it's Crabtree.
okay.
The church meets at St George's School.
So they've just taken on a unit which they're currently renovating
Yeah.
to become a church with a cafe at the front. And Rich and I and Eileen were invited to go and see that, so we had a look around. And that's an absolutely colossal project that they've taken on actually, and they've got a huge number of people helping them, but I suspect it's quite slow going. But the youth club that they mentioned here is something that they mentioned to us when we met them, which runs on a Friday evening, but it's at Crabtree. And I suspect they might use other facilities for their church facilities at the moment because their church isn't.
The church meets at St George's School, Affinity meets at Crabtree Church. So uses the stuff. I suppose they've got £8,000 a year that they spend on.
And they've got, okay.
Which for the youth club, which is quite a chunk of money, £8,000 of renting space.
Yeah.
Assuming it's for a couple of hours on a Friday night and a couple of hours on a Sunday.
So I think Clark's got a point to make. Please, Town Clerk.
Yeah, thank you. So again, I think Alistair, the principle, what you're saying there is spot on, and we do offer that in-kind support to partner organisations. I think in the case of Bethany, we wouldn't have a facility that we could offer in any case that would be suitable or that is available. And I think, as Beth said, the context that they have got this large new unit with big aspirations and they're fundraising for that. But just to add that wider inclined point is something we do quite a lot. The biggest example we've had in recent years was the History Society. Before they had the museum space in the EMC, we actually housed them in a storage area, well, a bit more glamorous than that, but in a room in the front of Park Hall where they had their archive. And so rather than giving them an annual grant, we had an in-kind contribution, what's equivalent of about £2,500, I think, off the top of my head. Other examples, if you in this chamber next week, we've got Rotary who are running a initiative that they run every year, 4 evenings a year, where they interview local young people, give interview skills. So again, rather than them coming through our grants process, we give them the space because we, that's what we've got. And we do the same with the likes of Harpenden Society, the History Society. So you're quite right. It's a principle we use. We'll always look to see whether there's a way in which we can give them in kind. But in this case, Bethany, we wouldn't be able to provide them the facilities that they need.
Okay.
There used to be a place for secondary school kids could go above the library.
I think it still is.
Yeah.
Is that something else then?
Yes, very different group.
This church is the one that helps with the Santa's Grotto in the winter, in the Christmas carnival, and they run the King's Pantry as well. This is the church.
And I think they also used to have Noah's Ark for mums and toddlers, didn't they?
And I don't remember reading that in
That's
their
the
accounts,
country
but
church,
when I
yeah.
looked at their account, I mean, they've got, a nice, healthy bank balance, but it's all going to be spent on this new project as far as I can see.
I've got to go in a second. Sorry, I'm flying solo tonight. My instinct would be to, if we could, actually purchase them something that entertains the kids, which whether that be a table tennis table or whatever it might be, because that's what will keep the kids entertained and keep them talking and give them potentially a skill or something fun to do, and it's competitive and it's so if anything comes out, that'll be my preference rather than just giving them a chunk of money to spend on stuff. So like to speak, because that's what keeps kids off the street and out in the park, is when they've got something to do that's fun, that is entertaining, it's a form of something similar.
Well, as I understand, they're asking for £2,000 because they have in mind a table tennis table
Some big
and
bags.
some fancy beanbags. So that's where the money's going.
Sounds good.
Right, you need to go, don't you?
We can take.
I'm going to agree with you, because I don't know whether we might be able to somehow buy it exempt of VAT or something like that. If you do things through council, sometimes it's just a bit more cost effective. I'll be all up for the table tennis table, but I think they can probably find cheaper beanbags. So on the
That's my
basis that,
set, yeah.
on the basis that we, not food, I don't think we should be buying food. But on the basis that we've only got £2,000 left, and that we know that there might be the genuine
Requests, yeah.
applicants in due course, it seems to me that the table is totally justified, and then a bit extra, whatever people think is the right amount for bean bags on top of that. But I do wonder whether if we buy them, as Kirsty says, whether actually it'd be more cost effective, and it just feels better than just
Table tennis table and a darts board or something to attract them there. They need something entertaining.
Yeah.
So, and that's what keeps them straight and
So
straight and narrow with the arrows.
you wouldn't be in favour of giving them £2,000 for the beanbag and the table tennis table?
My preference would be we purchase them something, whether that we give them the money to purchase it or we purchase it separately. Best case, I don't know what's possible, but with a specific instruction that it's for some form of entertainment or sporting activity or something that is attractive to the teenagers.
Yeah, the big pyramid just comes down to what's the most efficient, isn't it?
But that was my take on it. I do apologise. I've set up and sound. See you next time, Carl.
Yeah, good
Can we
night.
just be clear? Can we just be clear on, so what we're authorising a spend of £2,000 by the council and then giving those items to charity?
I think what you're authorising is £2,000 to spend on those items. Whatever's the most efficient way, be it through the council or through them, but for those items, not just £2,000 to go in the pot.
So-
1,500, sorry.
1,000.
Okay, sorry. So we're authorising the purchase of those items up to a maximum of £1,500. I'm just, I want to be clear what the decision is today. So do you want
Well, no, it's not my decision. It's just what I think. Not, it isn't. my decision.
what was
But
your,
my
I'm trying to understand
proposal-
your proposal?
Yeah. To be, yeah, go on, Carl. Oh. Yeah. Okay.
Just for the record, it's Pepsi Max.
Other
Well,
brands
well, it-
also
it's-
available.
It's in a Pepsi Max can.
That's it, yeah.
With
So, just the, I'll try not to slur my words now. Just to say, so we wouldn't be able to purchase and then donate it to them to get any kind of financial benefits. We're on dangerous grounds as a local authority to be able to do that. So it would be a case of identifying either the things you're willing to buy or a value you're willing to grant to them, but we couldn't do the purchase and donate as a way around it, unfortunately. However, sensible that sounds, we just can't in our accounting world.
I think your 1,500 quid ought to be able to get a sense table and some bean bags. For your 1,500.
So so the proposal, revised proposal, the response is we're approving a donation of £1,500 for the charity to spend on table tennis table and beanbags that they will procure. And that's the proposed action.
I think they found a good value table tennis table. The size and the spec seems really good. And they should go to John Lewis for the bingos. There you go.
So we're proposing, the proposal is £1,500 donation. Is that the action?
Yeah.
All those in favour?
Yeah.
£1,500.
Thank you very much.
And I believe that concludes our business for this evening. Any other business before we close? Councillors? Town clerk? Any other business?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Very good. And Daniel? No. Right, okay, declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much. Very good. Well done.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thanks. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Thank you, Carl.
Bye.
Bye.